Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to a special edition of the Powercat Podcast. It's two things in one. We're going to cover the transfer portal class for Kansas State, but if you haven't heard the news, well, I'll let Ryan Wallace tell you right now.
Yep. This will be my swan song here at GoPowercat.com. National Signing Day. The majestic day that it used to be, Fitz, that is now just boiled down to like, here's the guys who are in the transfer portal. That will be my last day at GoPowercat since 2007. 17
Incredible.
Years.
17 years. I told the story on the message board that I've been doing this now for 30 years. Started for 3 years for other people with a different magazine. Started my company up in 98. So 30 years total from 95 to now. I've had 2 recruiting editors.
That's
Brian Gates, who did an incredible job, was literally a fan. He was that fan who always was right on recruiting. He had this great gut instinct about him and knew, what was real and what wasn't. And I brought him on very early because here's the dirty secret about Fitz. I don't like covering recruiting at all. I mean, I'll come in for the big stories, but
right.
Chasing down a bunch of kids ain't my thing. So unlike a lot of these publishers that came up through the recruiting ranks, I came from the news side, basically from the newspaper side. So Brian helped me out to start, just kept rolling. And then you came on board and you guys overlapped briefly, but I think he knew it was time, just like it is time. And now we're going to roll into Cole, who has some big shoes to fill. But people don't understand this. And we'll get to the transfer portal class in just a second, but this is just a side gig for you.
Yeah.
You haven't been with us full time in quite a while.
Yeah, I was going back and kind of thinking on it. Like, originally when you brought me on, like you said, before I dipped into recruiting, I mean, I was always kind of a fan of it, but my thing has always kind of been video editing.
Right.
That was what I went to school for. That's what my career is in. But long story short, I left you in as a full-time guy at GoPowercat in 2013 was my last sports season. The last game that I covered from a football standpoint, where I was boots on the sidelines filming for GoPowercat, was the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl against Michigan with Jake Waters and Tyler Lockett. So, I mean, that tells you how long I've been gone as a full-time guy. I then go to Kansas City, and basically since 2014, I have been working remotely part-time for you, and I've had a full-time job. I'm coming up on, I think, my 10th year now at Garmin. So I've been at Garmin for a decade. That is my 9 to 5. And then every other hour that I can squeeze in between, being a parent and other side stuff that I do has been dedicated to GoPowercat. But yeah, I have been a part-time remote worker for you since 2013, 2014.
And I told him he had to be in the office. It's the trend now. And he said, no, I'm staying at home. Wally, it's been a wild ride, but this is your last go round in terms of recruiting. And you said it at the top, man. This used to be such a crazy day.
I miss it.
Insane day. And now that's kind of shifted to the fall, the winter, but this has been reserved now for the transfer portal class. And that's turned into a bigger deal than I think we imagined it would when we heard of the portal. But tell me about this portal class and how it's different from other classes, because I've explained this often. K-State goes about its NIL differently, and it's not necessarily using NIL with portal players like some schools do.
Yeah, I mean, it's ended up being, I thought it finished with some real flair here. I think the class will end up being like 15, unless there's somebody out there that I don't know about, which could be possible because I haven't been as plugged in over the last month as I've kind of handed things over to Cole. But, they were able to go out. I thought the way that they finished was really impressive in terms of going and getting a guy like Caleb Medford from New Mexico, another receiver, but a guy that, came up as a talented recruit, went to TCU, is known for his speed, goes and produces at New Mexico, and then go and get a national champion at George Fitzpatrick from Ohio State. An offensive tackle that has been on their depth chart, but just, hasn't seen a ton of the field, but he's at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And another guy that had a who's who of programs that were interested in him out of high school. Cherry Creek in Colorado, K-State recruited him, offered him. So there was some familiarity there. And that's, I think, what led to that being a pretty quick, recruiting transfer for him. But overall, I mean, and then Jayshon Ross was the other one that kind of came late, who, I mean, you add him to the defensive end room, Fitz, and you heard Buddy Wyatt talk about those guys, really all the defensive staff talk about. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were in spring ball and you were interviewing Buddy and he was saying, yeah, like I feel comfortable putting up to 5 or 6 guys on the field. Now, obviously Brendan Mott is gone, but you get Stufflebean back as kind of the core cog there, surrounded by just unlimited potential with some of those guys, with Ryan Davis, Jordan Allen, Jayshon Ross. The list goes on and on, Tobias and Somney. So really good group. But interestingly enough, Fitz, I think some of the guys that I was most impressed by in terms of like the wins, and I think what they're going to provide right away. George Fitzpatrick is obviously one, but they needed an offensive tackle even before Fitzpatrick. And to get a guy like Brandon Snee out of Wagner, I know it's a lower level FCS, but it's not the Missouri Valley, right? Where East Guilty came from. But to get a guy like him with 2 years of eligibility, how long and mobile and athletic he is, there's something in my gut that just says, I think he's going to be ready to go along with George Fitzpatrick right away. And even if he isn't, I think he's going to be able to scratch the surface this year and be a heck of a tackle next year. That's a really good get. And I've said it before all winter about what Gunnar Maldonado is going to bring to the safety room. You've got VJ Payne coming back, a couple other guys, Colby McAllister, some guys this year that were able to get their feet wet. But to me, Fitz, he is so versatile. He is so seasoned. He's a former captain at Arizona. I just feel like he's a plug and play guy, but a guy that's going to be the captain of that defense. Right. I think a guy that's going to come in right away, like we saw from Rust Yeast and so many other guys that the locker room's going to turn to. He's going to be dependable. He's going to know the playbook. I love that get. And so among all the other faces, to me, the way that they ended, and then those two guys that I talked about at kind of positions of need, but also areas that are going to really strengthen the locker room, really, really solid transfer class. It might not rank that high, Fitz, but they hit just about everywhere that they needed to.
They did. I mean, they did an outstanding job, and you can tell where they were most worried: receiver and tackle. They really, Wally, we're not supposed to be drinking on our podcast.
Sorry, it's a celebratory one here.
Look,
I got the Russells out.
We're just going to call this your last day. You can tell by what they recruited, what their needs were. That's literally a roadmap to it. And the more they recruited, they feel crappy about the receiver room. They've got some dudes, they got some guys they like, but they just want more competition. And I think we've seen that. If you don't have enough competition, it's not that the guys aren't good that might be starting. They haven't been pushed the way they can be pushed. And that's really what any coach wants. And I think, Coach Riley is looking for that along that offensive line. Get some fresh competition in there. Some guys have been firmly in place. Taylor Portier will be back, but I don't know that he's guaranteed a starting spot. There's some dudes that are pushing for time and ready to go. So this is going to be an interesting spring and fall camp for Kansas State.
I thought if there was one thing that you take from this signing day that you touched on there that you're going to, as a fan, you're going to want to watch into the spring, is I thought they made it very obvious, both with the transfer portal class that they're bringing in and with the guys that they signed from the high school standpoint, is receiver and offensive line. I think it was made very, very clear, and even the cornerback room, but I do think that they like that cornerback room.
Yeah.
I just think they wanted more guys there for the future, right? And trying to balance some classes out. But I thought that they made it abundantly clear with some of these guys that are maybe sophomores, redshirt freshmen, at wide receiver and offensive line, time to show up or get out, politely, because they made no mistake about it. They brought in some wide receivers like a Jerram Bradley that they feel like did his thing at Texas Tech, and they feel like they can tap right back into it. He's only got a year left. He's an immediate plug and play. But then you look at like Tibbs from Purdue, he's got multiple years of eligibility. So they see him as not only an asset right now, but moving forward. They're sending that message with those types of guys that have multi-years of eligibility left. Like, it's time. Like, we've given you guys a chance for some of you a year or more, some of you maybe, 6 months or whatever, but it's time to show us that you're either kind of worth hanging on to or not in this era of, the scholarship limitations, right? And wanting to put the best possible roster out there. It will be very interesting what happens in the spring, and beyond that, then who decides to end up jumping in that spring window, because that'll kind of be a signal of maybe I need to go somewhere else if I want to play.
Right, man. It's risky going in that spring window unless you have to. Which some guys will. You got to get down to 105. That's just the truth of what's coming. If it stays in place with there's like over 100 tests to this that people are countersuing now. So we think it'll fall into place, but you never know. But if it goes to 105, there's going to be some good football players without a home. But here's the catch. There's not going to be many roster spots out there because everyone else has got to get to 105.
Right.
And it's going to get a little messy, and it'll be interesting to see if teams try to get to 100, and say, okay, we got 5 spots for the portal. We'll see how that plays out. Cole can worry about that.
Well,
Cole.
And that's where a guy like, and we've sung his praises on at GoPowercat, just on all the shows. But that's where a guy like Clint Brown is proven to be so vital and worth every penny. I don't know what he's making, but I'm sure if Gene Taylor and Chris Kleiman can scrounge up a couple more, they'll probably give it to him, because he's just been everything that I can tell kind of on my way out the door, as much as I can be plugged in. I haven't heard, a bad thing about Clint Brown. I mean, I just think the guy gets it.
I know that, Chris Kleiman and Gene Taylor both watch everything we do. So I'll just say this. I think Clint Brown deserves coordinator money. Get on that. You hear me, Gene? Get on that. He's valuable. People don't understand how much stuff he lifts off of Chris Kleiman's shoulders and ends up with a guy that he trusts immensely. They work so well together. And it's only going to get smoother as they kind of work through this, and honestly might even redefine their recruiting approach and staff. We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah.
Enough of that. Let's get to you, because this is really my big news. When did you call me up and break this news to me? It's been a while. We've been sitting on this for a while.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, it's in this industry, it's not something that I think 2 weeks will suffice. And I think it was something that I've been thinking about for a while and kind of contemplating on, talking with my wife. It was, let me put it this way. First off, I told you in November, I think, because I wanted to I thought, let's give, Cole and some of these younger guys an opportunity to help me with early signing day. Because if you can survive kind of the content barrage that is early signing day, like it's cruise control, right? And then be able to kind of get them antiquated through the transfer portal process and tracking everything that's going on there, kind of get that head start of 2026. And then it's just a natural time around signing day for then me to go off right as you're transitioning into 2026. So I told you in November, but it's probably something that I've been thinking about for probably more than a year, because the 2023 class with Avery was so awesome. I loved everything about that class. It kind of touched everything for me and was kind of would have been a way to go out. And then, how it is, Fitz, with me. It's like you get into signing day, and then that transfer portal comes, and it just starts kind of scratching that itch again. And we got into 2024, and that class for me was everything was done by like June. It was like the most zero stressful class. There was no drama. Everything was just put away. And so I kind of got to go through 2024 in cruise control. And then October comes, and Kevin Flaherty and I go down and we see Lincoln Cure in person. And I'm like, I can't leave. And so 2025 sucked me right back in, and also kind of reminded me like, no, it's time. And the thing is, and I said it on the message boards in my kind of farewell post, is like, at the end of the day, for me, I don't care whether you're a subscriber and you're having to kind of think about how much you give GoPowercat in terms of carving that out of your finances, or whether you're a person where this is just like money that you're not even worried about in terms of your subscription. You're putting money, a dollar amount down, trusting that we're going to give you a proper amount of coverage.
Right.
And I felt like back in, several years ago, say 2023, I was in it. I felt like I was trying to dial it in as much as possible. And I felt like at times this year, outside of maybe Lincoln, who deserved a lot of attention, I just felt like maybe I wasn't keeping my end of the bargain. And early on, not to be long-winded here, but early on in my career, for folks that don't know, I've said it a million times, born in Memphis. My dad is a Memphis alum. I grew up as a Memphis fan long before I was a K-State fan. But my dad and I haven't lived in Memphis for years and years and years. And so we've had to keep in touch and in tune with Memphis athletics through people like you and me that cover Memphis.
Right.
And the fuel for me was always, there's somebody out there on our message board that is me and my dad that is waiting for that next morsel from Fitz and Wally about recruiting or about, whatever. And I got to give it to them. If it's 11:30 at night, I got to get this done. They're going to love this in the morning or whatever. I got to the point, Fitz, where I didn't have that passion for those guys anymore. And that's when I was like, to pull out a Rob Cassidy wrestlingism here, you don't want to be the Hulk Hogan that's like 50 years old, still getting in the ring. And everybody's like, he just doesn't have it anymore, man. Like, give it up. So yeah, I was like, the time had come where I knew it was in the best interest of me, my own personal life and everything, and everybody at GoPowercat to hand this baton off.
Well, it was a job well done. I appreciate everything you've done. The arc of your career with us is pretty interesting. You helped develop Deep Purple, the show with Shane Howard. It's so humbling to me when I look back over what we've built with GoPowercat and originally Powercat Illustrated.
Mm-hmm.
The number of long-term employees I had is staggering because I pay like shit. I mean, honestly, this industry does. If you're the Texas publisher, the Ohio State publisher, yeah, you're doing pretty well. But everyone else out here is kind of paycheck to paycheck in some ways, and particularly when you're trying to run a company out of that. So your loyalty and length that you served, and also always your honesty, where your headspace was at, I really do appreciate it. Cole's got his hands full. He does. And on top of that, recruiting's gotten annoying. I mean, because you've got so much noise out there with the portal and guys transferring in and out. NIL, how's that weigh in on things? It's become a beast. So I'm bringing in a guy or two to help Cole do some things, but man, it's a lot. It's a lot. And we asked subscribers to give you some questions. I cheated. I did. I cheated because I thought my guy Wagcat just laid them all out there. He had 5 questions that I think covered what everyone else was asking. So he didn't have many spelling errors, but he did. He's a musician. Give him a break. But I thought this was pretty good. These are great questions. I apologize if I offend anyone by using all from one guy, but I'm lazy. What's the funniest GPC memory that you can share?
I mean, we probably honestly talked about it on the podcast because
we share about everything.
I mean, those early days, I think I was on the original GoPowercat podcast. I think it was me and Rob Cassidy and you, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
It might have started you and Rob, but then I kind of got in there as a producer. I mean, we've told this, but the amount of hours that you and I collectively spent on some of those early podcasts of the drop-ins and the music. And I mean, it was like, we spent so much time on that, but I'm fairly certain this story has been shared, but it's just one of those like out of body moments. It was 2000 and maybe, I don't think it was the 12 years. So it would have been like 11 or 13. And you know where I'm going. We were in Lubbock, Texas, and it was you, me, and D. Scott Fritchen. And we were staying at, like a Hampton, I mean, just a normal hotel. And we got in that late that afternoon, and we're too lazy to like go look around for like the hot spots. So we went
Lubbock's so spread out. You want to walk.
Yeah. So we went catty corner that was within walking distance of the hotel to like, it was just, I don't even remember the name of it. It was like
The
a basic,
Office.
That's what it was. The Office. I don't even know if it said bar and grill. It just said like the Office.
And it didn't look like a bar on the outside.
No, because the windows were like blacked out or it didn't have windows or something. And we go in there and aesthetically it looked like any like Texas bar and grill that you can think of, you know? Yeah. And the next thing you know, like it was like, what is the movie? Now I'm blanking on it with George Clooney and it was a Tarantino film.
When he walked
Dusk Until Dawn or Dusk Before Dawn or whatever.
Yeah.
Where same kind of thing where it was like you walked in and the next thing you know, like in that movie, people are turning like vampires. But in this, it was like 1 minute D. Scott Fritchen is ordering like the hottest burger like known to man. So he's like profusely like sweating or whatever. Then the most like insane house band for like a bar and grill that you've ever heard comes up and is playing like every amazing like 80s, almost like 80s like black bands.
It's
like
fun.
Gap Band. They're more 70s, but like I'd have to go. It was unbelievable how good they were. And like
so good.
Then people are dancing, and then like certain members of the band are like randomly leaving to go outside and do other things and then like come back inside, and nobody could care less because we were all in like this dreamland where like you kind of left. It wasn't even like the next morning. We were like walking out like, did we just experience the most odd and yet most amazing bar we've ever been to in our lives? That story doesn't do it justice because you just had to be in that moment, and it was an out of body kind of thing.
Well, I'm going to tell the D. Scott portion of it because that was the topper. But people don't understand. D. Scott is serious and he's got that deep voice, and he puts off one persona, but he can be a lot of fun, and he's got this real dry sense of humor too. Well, people are dancing to this band, and it kind of felt like the Animal House thing when they walked in and there's, this band totally out of context for what you think you're at. They were so good. They were amazing. Every song sounded exactly like the record. There was like 8 of them. And they, like you said, some would go out and they'd play another song. And the main singer was a guy, but then there was a female singer over the side that sang backup vocals and sometimes lead. And there was this guy, roughly 40 in one of those, what was those shirts called? The overstitched shirt.
Yeah.
But he'd go over there and they're up on a stage. I mean, granted, it's only like 18 inches high at most, but he would stand in front of this lead singer and he was just dancing like he was dancing with her. It was just so weird. And it was not a good dancer. He's just like, so he sat down and D. Scott got up and did it. And everyone in the bar is like, oh no. I'm falling off my stool because he's got him down. He's just dancing the exact same way. And she's so confused. And I don't know if the other guy was mad or what, but he was just completely ruining him. Like,
oh, God.
And it was the funniest thing. But man, the band was incredible. So we went from him eating this burger that the waitress said, you don't want it.
Yeah, she was like, you don't want that burger. And he was like, I'll try it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he knocks it back and has some sweat. That's good.
Yeah.
Like, he's not human when it comes to that stuff. But yeah. And then all of a sudden we noticed a band is setting up. I'm like, what's this?
Oh, I mean, it was like Parliament. It was like Daz Band, Cameo. I mean, they played everything, which is a lot of stuff that was right up my alley. And I was like I was just like, are we sure this isn't like the real band that they brought into Lubbock, Texas?
It's amazing.
It was crazy.
It was absolutely amazing. Okay, this is the next one. What was the most exhausting recruitment you covered during your tenure?
Well, I mean, the low-hanging fruit is Lincoln. But I did enjoy like Lincoln as a person, and I got to know his family and stuff. So like it wasn't exhausting, in that regard. It was exhausting in terms of like keeping up with it. But that one was well worth it.
The Browns, maybe?
Yeah, they kind of predated me a little bit. Bryce, I was kind of like right on the cusp of. I mean, I thought about maybe the Browns. you start to think about some of the guys in Kansas, and obviously those are ones that you're like constantly keeping up with. Honestly, some of the ones that kind of dragged out got to be exhausting. Like I remember Moody Rubin being one that was just exhausting because it just felt like he was never gonna decide. He was still coming up to K-State like in November and stuff. So some of those like that, I remember. I mean, obviously Dylan Edwards, there were a lot of twists and turns with Dylan.
Yeah,
you know, he's committed, he's not committed. Like, he goes to Notre Dame, then he's coming back. Remember, he came back with Avery to a game in November. And it kind of like left that door open. So that one is definitely one that was exhausting. I mean, there's lots that you kind of, again, you got to keep up with it. If you fall behind for a split second, you're way behind. You're trying to scramble to catch up. So every single recruitment, you've got to try and keep a pulse of. But yeah, those are the ones obviously that, Avery needed a lot of attention in a good way. Fans wanted to know what's going on. Yeah. So it was exhausting from the standpoint of I felt like I was bugging his dad, Mark, a lot. But yeah, I mean, those are the ones that definitely require more attention. So they were exhausting in that standpoint. But honestly, I can't really think of one, Fitz, that was exhausting from like a negative sense. But yeah, I mean, the easy answer is some of the more recent ones: Lincoln, Dylan, Avery, those.
Yeah. You got to tell the Bryce Brown story from Miami.
Well, Miami was actually another interesting, like fun moment that I can share, because the Miami game was actually my very first road trip as a full-time member of GoPowercat, because I was actually traveling the year before that with Matt Walters and the K-Man crew for Powercat Game Day. And obviously I was kind of part-time working for you at the same time. So we would all meet up at the radio show and stuff. But so I had been going to road games, but I wasn't traveling exclusively with you guys, staying with you guys. So I had been going from staying like a couple guys in a room at a Best Western to, boy, Fitz spoils me right out of the gate. And I quickly realized that was maybe that was just a Miami trip. Because we get to Miami and I don't even know that hotel, Fitz, but it was real nice. Real nice. But the funny part is I don't know what kind of dimes you dropped on it, but we ended up after the game, D. Scott and I had to work through the night. So we never slept in the rooms that were paid for. We ended up spending literally all night. We were awake when you woke up to go get on like the 6 a.m. plane, because he was writing and I was busy working a video trying to upload it to the archaic Rivals player, which I then got hand slapped for talking badly about. But anyway, to the story about Bryce Brown, I get down on, I love to go down when I was working for you, go down early, and you can get kind of a sense of the team, who might play more, who's not, like who's energized, who's not, all that stuff when you go down early in pregame. Bryce Brown came out a different dude. That was like week 3, right? And like those first 2 weeks, I remember like he was just kind of going through the motions. It was very clear that John Hubert was going to get the bulk of the carries.
Right.
And he had a different energy about him at Miami. And they were playing, the DJs playing these songs, and Rob Cassidy might have been down there alongside with me because he knows the story well. And he starts playing something, some kind of song about partying or whatever. And we're a good 15, 20 feet away from the running backs as they're going through with Smitty. And next thing you know, or Dana Dimmel, I guess. Next thing you know, Bryce is just sitting there and we just hear, "I love to party." Out of nowhere. I love the party, or I love to party. I love to party.
It was so funny.
And it was so like random.
Context.
Just nobody knew what he was talking about. And then, yeah, he proceeds. That was the game famously where Bryce whiffs on, they put him in, whiffs on back-to-back blocks that about kills Colin Klein. The second one did. And there used to be video probably in the old Rivals player somewhere that I had slowed down. I followed Bryce on the second one. I followed him off the field with my camera. And boy, Michael Smith stared him down like I have never seen in my life. And Smitty was a player's coach. And boy, he stared a hole through Bryce Brown. But yeah, we talked about getting shirts with that once upon a time.
Oh my gosh, it was just so funny.
I love the party.
Because
the old podcast heads will remember that.
Yeah, he hardly played after that. Coach, that's just something you don't do for Bill Snyder is to whiff on protections. Clearly, because he just didn't want to make contact. So idiots are playing in the NFL and crediting Bill Snyder. My favorite part about the Miami trip was you didn't kill me for telling this. I probably have already told this publicly, but the night before the game, we had a gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up at Gloria Estefan's club by the football stadium. I think maybe Frank was down there with Anya, Frank Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe he picked, I don't know. We all end up there and it's winding down. It's not that late. And Frank goes, let's go to a club. Okay. So he takes a bunch of us to a club, but everyone had rides and cars, and I ended up not having one. So I ended up in the back seat of Frank and Anya's car. Now, keep in mind, when you're covering a beat, you generally get to know the assistant coaches pretty well. You deal with them a lot on recruiting and other stuff. So Frank and I had been in pretty good shape, and then all of a sudden he's head coach. So Frank's taking us down to Club Live, which is,
very famous.
Big deal. Right there at the Fontainebleau, a famous hotel there in Miami, another gorgeous hotel. And Frank's from Miami. This is his hometown. He got lost. He started going, exiting to go across a bridge because there's a lot of bridges down there over canals and stuff. And he realizes, oh crap, I'm going to a recruit's house, not to the club. He just was instinctively, I have no idea who the recruit was. I said, do you want to drop by and I'll just drunkenly try to recruit him? He goes, no, I think that'd be a violation. I'm like, yeah, it would absolutely be a violation. So let's go to the club. But then Frank ends up putting us in VIP. I don't know how many of them, there were a dozen plus of us, pays for everything. And Frank doesn't even drink. And it was it was chaos. And I got to cover a football game. I mean, I can't even have a beer the night before a game now. And you had an incident in Fort Worth that almost killed you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
well, it's one other story that just reminded me of that when you were talking about things that, would have been illegal or whatever. And this, I guess technically it would have fallen under the illegal thing, but it was such a wholesome thing that I think anyway, it was the one time we ever had recruits at the GoPowercat offices in Aggieville.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't in the evening, folks. It wasn't one of those types of situations. It's actually midday, like a Friday afternoon at like 1:00 in the afternoon. I had struck up such a good relationship through the early days of, I guess, Twitter or whatever, or text messaging with Isaiah Zuber and Duke Shelley, that I knew they were in town for their official visits. And I just happened to tell them, like, I would love to meet you guys. If you ever, like, when you're done with your visits, swing by. Well, they end up deciding to swing by after one of their lunches, like day one or day two that they're in town. And so next thing I know, we hear Jason Walker, calling for us up front. And I walk up front and there's Duke Shelley with, I think, like his dad, Isaiah Zuber with, I believe, his mom, and wide receivers coach Andre Coleman. And Andre Coleman's eyes were about this freaking big. And you could tell he was just like, I'm going to go through this thing. I'm not going to make it like uncomfortable, but I do not want to be here. And it was very cool for us. We showed him around the offices, whatever. Here's what we do. It was very brief. And we said our goodbyes or whatever. And that was the one and only time that we ever, I'm sure Dre was just like, man, if this word gets back to coach, I am toast.
No doubt. No doubt. No, and that wasn't the only time Andre was in the office. He stopped by. A little piece of history here. The wrestling mask pictures up at Taco Lucha, those were shot in our office down in Aggieville across the street from So Long Saloon. And he came in and I just outed him. He's one of the masked individuals on that. Some famous people came in and did that. It was kind of fun. Next up, let's see what we got here. Most exciting class you covered. It has to be 23, doesn't it? That was an amazing group of people.
23, an amazing class. And like I said, one that I felt like I got in early with, I think, just having covered and talked to those guys since they were sophomores and juniors, with Dylan Edwards. We were at the Sharp Combine I mean, D. Scott Fritchen interviewed Leon in the stands, and Dylan was coming off his freshman year. I think people in Derby knew about him, and maybe nobody else. So, I mean, I kind of knew Dylan since he was a freshman. Avery, I got to know really well. But then you start going down that list. I mean, Jordan Allen, Joe Jackson was a guy that I thought I had a pretty good relationship with looking back. It still burns me that he was a July 4th commitment. And again, that's one of those, you're starting to catch on why I might be getting out of this thing here. You got to drop what you're doing on July 4th, or
I think I'll commit on New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah. Or you got to have the news up front, which truth be told, I don't really get that news much anymore. And I kind of did that to myself probably, but I mean, yeah, I mean, Asa Newsome, that was an exhausting recruitment, but a good one. He was a really nice kid. But yeah, Wesley Fair, Andre Davis was right down the street. So I got to know him pretty well. And Will Ancio, Camden Beebe was in there. His dad, Tom Beebe, is just one of the best. Just having covered Cooper and Camden's recruitments, some great families in that class, great kids in that class. I loved everything about 2023. They were just awesome. I mean, to this day, I cannot thank Avery's family enough, specifically, you know, his parents. Mark Johnson has just been unbelievable. But they were the only ones for years and years and years, I had two dreams in terms of covering something kind of behind the scenes for GoPowercat. One was behind the scenes of an official visit. I got the blessing from Nate Matlack on it. Obviously, that was a no-go from K-State, and I don't blame him. That's a far-fetched kind of thing to trust somebody will go behind the scenes and you know, do it the right way, right? But the other one was just covering a commitment the day that it happens, behind the scenes. And that was something that I worked through with Avery and his dad for months before it actually came down. I feel like I probably had a gut instinct that he was going to K-State, you know, weeks before anybody else did, simply because Mark and I were talking about me coming down and doing that video. And so to this day, that was a bucket list thing for me that they granted, and I am indebted to them forever. I mean, they're just tremendous, tremendous people. Avery is everything that you've seen and then some. And, you know, I love Mark because Mark's the loudest guy in the room, but at the same time, like, he wants the absolute best for his son, but also whatever his son is representing and those around his son. And so they're just great ambassadors for K-State.
Yep. That was a special class, and it's a special class on the field too. And,
yeah.
I've done daily deliveries on how the impact of that class is going to be felt for years. I mean, the guys who redshirted were freshmen, like Joe Jackson, and they're all showing out now. Well, what was the most significant loss, as in a recruit you thought you would end up with K-State, but didn't?
Oh man, Wags. You can see how much I prepared for these questions.
I didn't
there was, one that comes to mind just because I just grew to love him as a player. I didn't feel like I had a great relationship with him, but I just thought his film was tremendous. He ended up not working out. But anybody that remembers this recruitment will remember why he went to the school that he did, and thus maybe why it didn't work out for him. But there was a guy, I want to say it was the 2021 class, by the name of Matthew Langlois, and he was from Louisiana. I think mom or dad had some ties to Louisiana State. I think his grandfather did. So he ends up at LSU. Remember, he committed to K-State like late fall or late summer, ended up flipping to LSU. They ended up offering him, and he flipped. And that was one to me that was a loss from the standpoint that I just always had this gut feeling of what that kid could have been and would have been at K-State. And he ended up going to LSU. I think he played a little bit on special teams. There was some injury history there because I tracked his career for a little bit. Never did end up in the transfer portal because I think it meant that much to him to put on the LSU uniform. But he could have played a lot more at K-State, and I know how bad they wanted him. The other one that comes to mind just now that I remember from way back when we were still in the Aggieville offices. So this would have been maybe the Dalvin Warmack class, was a kid named who's still playing in the NFL today and he's tremendous. I mean, I think he's been an all-pro once, maybe. Kid named Harrison Phillips. He's played for the Vikings now, I think, played for the Bills as well, but he's out of Omaha. And that was a kid that K-State badly wanted as a defensive tackle, kind of defensive end. But I think they saw him as a pass rushing defensive tackle, that kind of bad analogy, but like in the mold of an Aaron Donald was kind of what he was in high school. And I still remember sitting at that kind of wraparound desk that we had at the front, because he called me and I wanted to get an update from him of where things stood. And he called me and told me that he was committing to Stanford. And he told me that he cried on the phone with Bill Snyder, because it was that gut-wrenching for him to say no to Kansas State, but he knew that Stanford and everything that it held academically was the better spot for him. And I thought he was going to cry on the phone with me. Was very thankful of like the coverage we gave him and everything. But I got off the phone thinking, man, like it's weird. As many years as I've been in it, you know right away when you're on the phone with a kid if they're right for K-State, specifically Snyder and Kleiman, and not just how articulate they are, but you can just tell like what's important to them, how much they value your conversation that you're having, how much they're willing to carve time out of their schedule for you and stuff. Harrison Phillips was one of those guys, and man, he would have made that class with Dalvin Warmack and Elijah Lee, and golly, that would have been a class. That was also one of the first recruits, Fitz, that I would say I learned because I got burned from, was that class. There was a kid in that class named Muhammad Berry, and he went to Tucker with a different time than Duke Shelley, but I mean, he was part of that whole crew that was a little bit older. And I got burned by him. I stuck with Kansas State. He's going to pick K-State. Don't worry. Like, he's going to stay committed. And Nebraska was on him hot and heavy. And that was back in the days where like I was getting phone calls at all times of the night. I remember Muhammad Berry calling me when I was engaged to my now wife in our apartment in Kansas City, when I was in bed at like 11:30 at night. It was like 12:30 his time, calling, like wanting to talk about. I was like, I'm not a coach. Like, what? Why are you? What? And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, talking to me about like I still feel like K-State's the play. And then Bill Snyder didn't go down to his house on the in-home. And I think that, among some other things, in terms of just the interest, kind of ended up burning him at the end. But because I was getting these calls and texts from him, like, yeah, I'm K-State, I stuck with it. And if we had a crystal ball back then, I probably would have had a pretty high crystal ball for K-State. And everybody in Nebraska was telling me, you're wrong. And that was when I learned pretty quickly, like, you can listen to the kid, you can kind of trust the kid, but you got to take what some of the K-State staff is saying. You got to take what the high school coach is saying, what the parents are saying. It's got to be kind of a universally like agreed upon thing in terms of where a kid's going to go. And I learned from Muhammad Berry pretty quick that you don't just take the kid's word for it.
No. And we talk to colleagues a lot at other schools.
Yeah.
You interact, I just interacted with the Texas A&M publisher. I think he reached out to you because I said, hey, by the way, he's stepping away. And, so what, it was A&M and KU, because Michael Swain, we love the dude, and Oregon. Well, you four are talking.
Yeah.
You are talking. And that was one, once in a while you'll get a kid, and this wasn't Avery. I mean, that was Avery's recruitment I was mentioning, but once in a while you get a kid who's telling everyone he's going there. Coach, I'm coming. Yeah, coach, I'm. And then when you start comparing notes with your colleagues at other schools, you're like, that son of a gun's telling everyone the same thing. You run into that.
Right.
So it's really helpful to do that. But yeah, they're kids. They're kids trying to make a huge decision in life, and a lot of things going on. My favorite story is a kid backed out of a tech commitment once because he didn't like the water in Lubbock. Nobody can understand what's wrong with Lubbock's water. This wasn't one of the questions, but I want to put you on the spot here with this one. What is the kid that ended up at K-State that you missed on the most, that you didn't think would cut it, but ended up being pretty damn good?
I'll tell you, well, one that jumps out right away to me, because I remember being in text message threads with us as a staff going like, I mean, he's a pickup, but he probably won't start, Reggie Stubblefield.
Mm-hmm. I
was kind of like, nah. And it wasn't because he was from Prairie View, but it was just like, there wasn't a lot of tape. Like, it's not like he was a regular starter down there. I was like, I don't see it. And I mean, not only did he play at K-State, but I mean, the energy that guy brought. I mean, he ended up being like a thermometer for the defense.
Yep.
Was so important for kind of that turnaround, and then has gone on and had an outstanding career in the CFL. He just made news, I think, today that he got there was kind of a battle of which team was going to pay. I mean, like, he was a wanted man in the CFL free agency. So Reggie comes right away. Reggie's one that jumps out. Golly, I'm trying to think, sticking with that position, the defensive backfield, I wasn't convinced that Echo Boydo would turn into what he turned into. I mean, to be again on a lengthy, NFL tenure, whether he's, on a practice squad or not. I mean, he's a wanted guy in the NFL. And then to play, as much as he played for K-State, Echo stands out as another guy. And I saw him in high school and I was like, well, he's fast, but I wasn't entirely convinced that he would be a guy. So, those two just like right away jump out. There's certainly more. I've missed on countless, but those two jump out right away. Reggie was one that I remember being pretty vocal of like, I don't think this is a dude. He was a dude.
He was a dude. Another dude was Jacob Parrish, and you were on his bandwagon early in the process. And it finally took Chris Kleiman seeing him at camp say, yeah, we're going to offer this kid, because I'm not even sure they were going to get him as a walk-on.
No, I mean, they were trying to push him the walk-on route, and then they were like, we're going to gray shirt you or whatever. And then it became like, we've got some things happen with the transfer portal and a scholarship opened up, and God bless Chris Kleiman. Because I think Van Malone liked him. I don't know if Van loved him. I think Taylor Bratt loved him, but again, Taylor's not an assistant coach, so he can't, extend the offers. Right. And so it was just some back and forth with the staff about his size. And Chris Kleiman saw him at camp. And then I don't think he got out to a game his senior year. Maybe he did, but kind of flipped on the end of the year tape and was like, there's too much here.
Yeah.
And that's what I was like, yes, that's what we've been trying to tell you guys. Do you know the other one though that I nailed, Fitz, that I felt like, boy, everybody was team this guy. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Jonathan Banks. Do you remember Jonathan Banks, the quarterback that they brought in to compete with Jake Waters? And boy, man, everybody and their mother was like, Jonathan Banks is going to be the guy. I was like, I don't know. I don't know about this guy. Jake ended up having the year that he had that was just terrific.
I'm going to say it. Kansas State is the only football program in the history of the game that is racist against the white quarterbacks. It's like fans were like, no, the other guy, not Jake Waters, Daniel Samms. Yeah. It was just constant. It was hysterical. Okay, here's the last one. What recruit did you enjoy covering the most?
Avery.
It's got to be Avery.
People,
it's hard to explain how mature he was in high school. I mean, it's hard for people to understand. This isn't us sucking up to the star player. He was generally astonishing at how well mannered and how well he handled his business as a high school player.
Well, hang on. I just thought of something and I'm on my way out, and I'd like to think that Avery likes me enough that I can tell the story. We'll laugh about it later. Right. But we talk about guys that we missed on. Avery, I remember it was kind of deeper into that class. They were trying to get some finishing pieces. Right. And there was a kid that K-State ended up signing in that class named Wesley Watson, who has since transferred to Texas A&M. His dad is in the athletic department down there or whatever. But Wesley had some really good high school tape, I thought.
He did.
And Avery thought so too. Because I remember Avery and I kind of texting about the class and like, how are they going to finish this class out, right? And I remember us talking, and Avery and I were kind of like, like, again, we both didn't dislike him, but I remember us both saying like, yeah, if we can get if we can get the Wesley Watson kid, yeah, I think that'll really strengthen, the wide receiver room. Cause the Jace Brown guy is pretty good, but I think the Wesley Watson guy will like kind of take the room up another notch. And looking back again, Avery and I can laugh on that now because he's best friends with Jace. Jace is outstanding player. So it's funny to look back on now. But yeah, there are guys like that constantly that you're like, he just doesn't do it for me on tape. And yeah, because either you don't see, you don't see the tape, right? Or they get up here and they prove everybody that, well, high school is high school and I'm a different player now. And so that's what Jace did. But getting back to Avery, I mean, anytime you wanted to talk to the kid, he made himself available. The family was very open in terms of access. It made it worth the times that you would drive down to Wichita. I drove to Topeka to see him. And again, he would always stick around and give me kind of one-on-one opportunities at the end. And again, he was just a pleasure to talk to because you didn't always have to talk about football with him. You could talk about, other stuff, and he was open to it. And again, it's not like I don't want to make it sound like I was talking to the 17 and 18-year-olds like on a regular, but there were just those handful of guys that, you'd be talking and asking recruiting questions, and then maybe the conversation would just kind of continue on into an NBA game or whatever. And that was nice. It was kind of refreshing that you weren't always looked at as kind of the reporter guy. And so that was always nice. And like I said, just not only was it Avery, but it was Mark, and it was the extension of all those guys. But beyond Avery, the short list that comes to my mind that I just absolutely loved, Dalvin Warmack, I mentioned him. I mean, him and Trey Walker are two guys that from the get-go were always open and available for us and welcoming GoPowercat in. Trey Walker had me and D. Scott Fritchen down to Olathe to cover his signing day. And that was like never done back in the day. It felt like nobody would ever have us out. And he was like, yeah, I want you there. Not just, for the coverage, but like, I want you guys covered this recruitment. I want you to be a part of it. Trey was amazing like that.
Mm-hmm.
Dalvin and I still talk to this day. Curry Sexton great. And I still talk to this day. Mm-hmm. Those are just tremendous guys that I think to them, I appreciate this. I think they looked at me as, more than just kind of a guy that was trying to like dig at them for answers, right? It was just not only is this guy doing his job, but I think they kind of could tell that I cared about it. And they were just great human beings. And again, I think that shines through with how far they've gone in their careers and, how welcome they are back to Kansas State, no matter what. And I love those guys. So yeah, those are kind of the short list of guys that I can think of that I covered that, again, it wasn't just about access, but just their personalities and how welcoming they were and how easy they were to work with.
I remember, speaking of that class, Curry Sexton comes in because Shane Howard, your predecessor at shooting for GoPowercat, was doing a recruiting
Great
film,
story.
A little side gig, do a little side gig for Curry. And Curry came in to check out some stuff. So,
Fitz, by the way, that was a poor Curry. I mean, if we look back at that tape, maybe Curry has it on YouTube or something somewhere. It's atrociously bad. We had poor Curry standing against a wall. I'm Curry Sexton. I'm from Abilene, Kansas. Oh, it was vintage. It was very
vintage. But Curry brought a friend, a teammate, who walks him in the back door at GoPowercat. He fills the back door. I don't know how in high school Cody Whitehair fit through the door. He was the largest high school junior, whatever he was at the time. He was a year younger. Mm-hmm. I'd ever seen in my life. And we go to the national, the 5-star thing in Baltimore. And I think it was Baltimore. And then we're looking at the top linemen in the country, the 5 stars. They don't look as like a player like Cody Whitehair. Like what? That's the only kid I can say that we underserved as an industry. He was just a run-of-the-mill 3-star, and that dude should have been a high 4, if not a 5.
Yeah, I mean, that was on the cusp right before when I started doing what did I call them? The Hard Knocks that I did with Scott France, Alex Delton. Those are 2 guys too that would be on my short list. They allowed me to do some cool things, but Cody was right before that. And yeah, I'm like you. I look back, I'm like, I should have gone out to Abilene a little bit more. But yeah, that was wild that day. Curry's like, I got some DVDs. This was pre-huddle, folks. So he had DVDs that he would bring in. Shane and I would kind of basically ingest them into our system and then cut up the highlights for him and make the highlight tape. But so every so many weeks, Curry would drive in from Abilene and hand us these DVDs. And yeah, there was that one time he's like, yeah, I brought my friend. And we were like, does K-State know about this friend?
No doubt.
They
No
did.
doubt.
They did.
Well, Wally, let's put a wrap on it. Any final thoughts here as Daphne's getting restless?
No, I just, like I said, on the message board post, this has been everything and more for not just like my career, but my life. Like I'm truly feel like I'm leaving this completely fulfilled. There's not a regret that I have. There's not a piece of me that, feels like the tank is empty, that I've left anything in the tank. Like I've left it all out there on the field, so to speak. I guess, am I regretful of some of the way that I behaved in the beginning and some of the things that I've said at times? Yes. But again, I said this on the boards, but you trusted that me going through some of those experiences would help me grow. And I feel like over the years at GoPowercat, I'd like to think I've matured a little and grown up a little bit from those days. Because let's be honest, and again, the old hairs will remember this, but like when Tim Fitzgerald would come to Purple Power Hour, when I first met Tim with Shane, GoPowercat was like the ESPN of Manhattan. I mean, it still is to me the brand of K-State sports. And so when I started covering recruiting, the immaturity of me was that I thought I had arrived, that I thought I was Adam Schefter. And honest to God, I think the KSO development, right, and brought out that helped me so much more than at the time I could have ever imagined, because it made me realize you have to work harder. You haven't arrived. You're a tiny morsel of this. Do your job and keep your nose down and just do it. And so that development ended up being one that was a blessing. And so, I'm just so happy to have been a part of it for as long as I have. And I give you all the credit for me sticking around. Because, you mentioned it earlier, it was never about the money. If you were a different type of person and a different type of manager, I wouldn't have stuck around, because maybe the money wouldn't have been enough. But you gave me so much freedom, and at the same time, like, became such a friend for me to, like, I want to see what Fitz thinks about this and kick these ideas around that I couldn't walk away. I didn't want to walk away. And so, I know it's time. The guys that are coming in, I feel like they're going to do everything that I used to do and then some. And Cole's got that fire in him. And he's got a team around him. That one of my negative traits was that it was so easy for me to just say, I'll do it. I got it. And in this world, as you mentioned, with NIL and transfers, and you're trying to talk to coaches and parents, and you can't do it all by yourself. And Cole gets that. Cole's going to have a great team. He's going to manage it well. And I'm so excited to see where GoPowercat goes from here.
And you're not getting out of this. You're still going to do your KCSN podcast with our friend Kevin Flaherty. And you might show
I'm
up
not
on
done with
Powercat.
recruiting. I love local recruiting. I love high school recruiting. I don't like, and I don't want to sound like the Nick Saban here or whatever, but like, it was time for me to go because I'm not a big fan of maybe where it was going. I don't like talking to agents over parents and players and that sort of thing. So I feel like getting back to my roots and covering just Kansas and Kansas City and not caring about where a kid's going and why he's going there. It's just all kind of high level recruiting stuff that we're able to do. And I get to get out and go to camps, and I'm still going to go to games. You still might see me at GoPowercat, because if Fitz needs help with a camp or a combine or something, I'll be there. I'll help you guys out as much as I can. But, you know, it was a matter of me kind of taking a step back, dedicating more time to places that I feel like are going to give me energy and not maybe drain it, and give more time to my wife and my kids and uninterrupted time with the phone away, and be able to still kind of, again, scratch that itch with local recruiting and no matter where kids are going. Because Fitz, I mean, this week I had some free time to reach out to some coaches that I know that are at lower levels to try and help some guys that are still left out there. And I don't know if I'll have time to do that for everybody, but there are 2 kids that I felt like that were deserving that I saw this fall, that any NAIA, MIAA, FCS coach that I know, I was trying to interact with and just say, hey, there's a kid here in Kansas City that I feel like deserves a shot. And now I have time to do that. And to me, that's what it's about. I want to shine more of a spotlight on Kansas and, you know, again, not be burdened with some of the expectations that rightfully come with being the recruiting editor at GoPowercat. But again, I cannot thank you enough. You gave me a shot with just being a video editor, and then entrusted me to do this for as many years as I've done it, in times that I know that you were like second guessing. But you were the reason that I stuck in this, and all the people at Wabash Station. I love you guys to death. Yeah,
it's been a ride. It's been incredible. I feel like we have transitioned now as a company. You were my final long-standing employee. You know, of course, I had D, and Zach was with me a long time, and now you, back-to-back years. So, all of a sudden, Cole and Gilbert are old guys on my staff. How the hell did that happen?
Right.
Who's the adult? I'm not. Although,
where's Rob Cassidy? Where's Brett Regan when we need him?
I have mellowed out. I don't think I could have made it. I couldn't survive with what we did on road trips in the past. I mean, that ended that I love to party attitude ended about 10 years ago on the road, but we'd get after it on the Friday night.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to savor some of that.
Ryan Wallace, thank you so much for everything you've done for us as a company, for me personally, and you've turned out to be a great friend. And if you ever compete against me, I'm going to come slit your throat in the night.
No, that's not
too good.
No, that's not happening.
So, folks, do stay in touch with him at KCSN.
Yes,
and he'll continue that podcast. And I'm betting at some point that byline is going to show up at GoPowercat because he'll have something he wants to share. He can't not share things.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And
hey, Fitz, did you hear this?
We'll have him on a podcast because
I'll have you on a podcast.
Ooh, what am I going to talk about?
Well, come on.
I don't know. Maybe Cole's sucking. I have to do recruiting. Oh no. Thank you, Ryan Wallace. And that's going to wrap it up for this kind of interesting, unique podcast. I'm glad we got to do it.
Thank you.
I'm glad that the entire college football nation cleared out this date, so it's not as important as it used to be, so we could do this. What a perfect time to end it. He has been great for us for a long time. Ryan Wallace into retirement to do his real job and raise 2 awesome daughters with an awesome wife and
son and daughter.
Oh, son and daughter. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know that.
I've never met him. You wisely have kept.
I know you know that though.
So that's it for the podcast. Thank you so much. And we are out.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.